Hey everybody, it's Chuck Dixon back to answer your questions. And what are all your questions about? Yeah, you know what I do for a living, and what I do for a living is I write comic books. So let's get to business. If you have a question for Ask Chuck Dixon, that would be me. You can send it to brunobookstore@gmail.com. It's the most direct way to reach me. I check it a few times a day. I'm not going to miss it. I love reading your questions, your suggestions, your comments. People send me images of stuff. It's a lot of fun and very much appreciated. And sometimes I'll even answer questions through the email that I'm not about to answer over the internet. Okay, let's get to the first question from Jared Mitchell. There's a notion that superheroes are super gods, and they represent modern versions of classical mythology. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I mean, I hear this. I get questioned about this a lot. I think it makes comics a little more grandiose than they are. To think that they contribute to culture in a way that the ancient myths contributed to the culture of their day. And let's face it, these are created as wish fulfillment fantasies for escapist fiction purposes. They're not like ancient mythology used to explain the inexplicable. You know, back in the day, you know, how does the sun travel across the sky? Well, a guy draws it in a chariot. You know, what causes the sound of thunder? It's this big guy with a hammer. You know, how does the earth remain in place? It rests on the back of a giant turtle. You know, things like this. I mean, people were explaining because they didn't have the science, they didn't have the technology, they didn't have the knowledge. They were trying to explain the world around them, which, you know, made them feel more comfortable. Because you don't want to live in a world of mystery where you don't know why anything's happening. And so you had people who just make up answers. and you know, this made people feel better. I don't think comic books are made to make people particularly feel better other than, you know, entertaining them. And I've never been attracted to the godlike characters to begin with. I like the more street level type character. My heroes are generally not out to save the universe. They're out to pay their bills. And so the whole idea of super gods and comics as a new mythology, it just doesn't sit well with me. So yeah, I don't subscribe to that theory. But if you like that theory and you want to write in that theory, God bless you. You know, do that. If that's your approach to the material, I got no problem with that. It's just not mine. Sean Jump. I have a question regarding your thank you, Doctor Doom miniseries known as Doom the Emperor Returns. How did you prepare to deal with a villainous character like Victor Von Doom, usually rated as the arch-villain of Marvel Comics? A position I wholeheartedly agree with. Me too, Sean. Did your attitude toward the character change any as you wrote the story? Do you feel that Doom is essentially evil incarnate, as portrayed by Mark Waid in Unspeakable, or that he is a somewhat tragic character whose ambition, arrogance, and hatred of Reed Richards have twisted a potentially noble character beyond redemption, which is how he comes across to me in Jim Shooter's original Secret Wars? I'm a Doom fanatic. Doom is my favorite comic book villain of all time. I loved him when I was a kid. My first Fantastic Four comic was issue number 5, beginning of Doctor Doom, the first appearance of Doctor Doom. Love the character. You know, and then a few years later, they did his origin. I agree with the Jim Shooter approach. You know, that he's a tragic character. He believes he's doing right, but he's petty and vindictive. You know, that's what's great about him. He's this grandiose, frightening character. You know, he's just so full of himself, and he's so confident, sure of what he's doing, and so arrogant. But then at the heart of it, you know, he just holds this grudge against Reed Richards because I think in his heart he fears that he may be the second most intelligent human being in the Marvel universe. That Reed may be a little bit smarter than him, and his hubris just can't handle this. But he is a tragic character coming from a past, with his mother and all that stuff. And yeah, I don't see him as evil incarnate. I don't like evil incarnate characters. I feel that every villain in a story is doing what they're doing, unless they're an utter psychopath. And even then, they've deluded themselves. But I think villains they have the belief they're doing the right thing, even when they've gone too far. It's the ends justify the means for these guys. And in the case of Doctor Doom, he's looking out for his little country of Latveria by trying to dominate the world. And that's his main mission in life, is to bring order out of chaos. So how did I prepare for the miniseries? I just wrote Doom the way that I felt in my heart that he was ever since I was a kid. I just wrote the Doctor Doom that I knew. So there wasn't a lot of preparation or thought, because I'd always wanted to write Doctor Doom stories. So I was kind of geared up and hit the ground running immediately. So it wasn't that tough a deal for me to work on the Doom thing. Yeah, the only thing that threw me was it's sort of set in a different reality, a different continuities. He wasn't on planet Earth. There was sort of like a apocalyptic road warrior aspect to it, which made it interesting. But at the end of the day, Doom is Doom. You could plop Doom down in any continuity, in any kind of story, in any kind of environment, and he's going to triumph and dominate and oppress. He's going to be the top dog. It's kind of like the same approach I have to Bane. Bane has a lot of Doom aspects to him. The pettiness and the ruthlessness and the total arrogance about everything he does. That he must be the best. For him to succeed, all others must fail. And that's certainly Doom's philosophy. So yeah, it was a blast to write. I would, and I was very grateful for the opportunity and the trust they put into me to basically bring Doom back into the Marvel Universe. Okay, John Castle Ananya, I hope I'm getting that right. What is the continuity of your Batman Spawn one-shot? Yeah, I really have no idea. I don't know where. I guess it fits in Batman canon because myself and the other writers, we didn't like writing things that were outside of canon unless it was an Elseworld story. So I assume it fits somewhere in Batman continuity. I don't know where it fits in Spawn continuity. In fact, before we started work on the book, Denny O'Neil assigned myself, Doug Mensch, and Alan Grant to write this. We were at a Bat Summit. I've told the story before, but it's worth telling again. Denny didn't want to assign it to just one of the regular Bat writers because he knew it was going to be an enormous royalty payday, and it was. It still pays out to this day. Very, very popular project. So Denny thought it was unfair to just favor one writer over the other two. So he said that the three of us would write it. And how would we write it? We decided that we would put our names on slips of paper, and they would be drawn out of Denny's hat. Denny always wore this ass-kicking hat. And Jordan Gorfinkel drew the names. And so Doug Mensch's name was drawn first, so he would write the beginning of the story. Mine was drawn second. I would write the middle of the story. And Alan Grant's name was drawn last, and he would write the end of the story. But how to plot it, we didn't know anything about Spawn. And we bought some of the comics and read them, and still didn't know anything about Spawn. We really didn't understand the character at all. So Doug Mensch, I think the second evening of the summit, called Todd McFarlane on the phone. And he sat there with a legal pad and asked Todd about all the things we needed to know about Spawn. He wrote them all down. And then the next day he explained Spawn to us as Todd McFarlane had described it to him, so that we had some grasp of the character. And, and from there we just sort of came up with, a MacGuffin for the plot line, War Devil, and all that stuff, and just went to work and just, Doug wrote his 15 pages. I wrote the next 15 pages, and then Alan did cleanup, based on the very, very loose plot that we had cooked up. And I think the plot was mostly cooked up by Doug and Alan. They were closer collaborators than I ever was with them. So I think they cooked that up overnight and presented it to the rest of us on the last day of the summit, and then we went to town. As I said before, my only requests on the story was that Batman be allowed to make fun of Spawn's cape, and that Spawn introduced himself by saying, "You can call me Al." And Todd McFarlane was fine with both of those things. So I was pleased. Because I thought they were, pretty good gags. But yeah, as far as continuity, where it fits in, it's anybody's guess. Tommy Morris. Howdy, Chuck. I think you and Jorge Zaffino are one of comics' dream teams and ended way too soon. I've recently revisited Winterworld, The Horned God, that was an issue of Savage Sword of Conan, and Seven Block, all masterpieces from both of you. Could you fill us in a little about this fallen, enigmatic master and why you are not working with Gerardo? Gerardo is Jorge Zaffino's son. Well, I'll start with Gerardo. I mean, I've been in contact with Gerardo because he's the heir to, Jorge's estate, and so is, basically my partner in the ownership of the different various creator-owned properties that Jorge and I put together, Seven Block and Winterworld. And so I've been in contact with him, and his artwork is amazing. I mean, he draws very much like his dad, but he's got his own iconic, idiosyncratic stamp on the work. So he's his own guy, but it's hard to get away. I mean, look at the Kuberts, Adam and Andy. I mean, they draw a little like their dad, and in the past a lot like their dad, because why wouldn't they? So Jorge is obviously Gerardo's main influence, and he's done well. I haven't worked with him because there's simply no project has come up to work. I certainly would love to work with him someday. Now, as far as my relationship with Jorge, I saw his artwork in a portfolio shown to me by the Villagran brothers, and they showed me all of these different, pieces of artwork by a variety of Argentine artists that they knew and worked with and were friends with, and the work was all uniformly excellent. But the most striking of all the stuff they showed me was Jorge's work. There was just this raw power to it, just this assured authority, and the way he could work in such an impressionistic way, but still have a huge impact. I mean, I had to work with the guy, and I wanted to create something as raw as his work was. And so I came up with Winterworld, and Eclipse greenlit it, I think mostly based on Jorge's artwork. Jorge did a couple of promo pieces that basically served as the 3 covers for the series, and we went to work, and it was quite successful, particularly amongst other artists in the industry. Jorge was very much an artist. When I meet an artist for the first time, generally they always ask about Jorge Zaffino. What was he like and everything else. And what was he like? Jorge was just a sweetheart of a guy. Just a terrific guy. Super professional, super dedicated, very self-effacing. I mean, I believe he was a comic book genius, but he didn't act like one. There wasn't an ounce of prima donna in this guy. He was always concerned that I would like the work. I remember he gifted me a drawing of Batman when I showed up in Buenos Aires, when I went down there for a visit. And I said, "Wow, this is terrific." Well, terrific is not a word that the Spanish people understand. And he looked crestfallen when I said, "This is terrific." because he thought it meant terrible. And then Enrique Villagrán had to quickly say, no, he means it's good. He means he loves it. And his face brightened up. But so I got to spend some time with him when I was in Buenos Aires, and I got to spend time with him when he visited New York once. And the thing is, I didn't speak Spanish. I still don't speak Spanish. He didn't speak English. And at one point, I was visiting his apartment in Buenos Aires, and his wife had made dinner, and it was a terrific evening. And we had a translator there with us so that we could talk to each other. And the translator had to excuse himself to use the bathroom. And Jorge and I are left alone to just sort of stare at one another. And so I said, Russ Heath? And he goes, oh, Russ Heath, see. And then he starts naming Argentine artists. And I would go, oh, yeah, that guy's great. So we just basically were idolizing our favorite artists back and forth because it was the language of comics, the shared interest and shared language of comics. We didn't need to know each other's spoken language to communicate that way, to basically to geek out. So, but yeah, he left us way too soon. He was, I think he was 42 when he died of a massive heart attack, and it's an enormous loss because I think he was really just getting started in international comics, working for Europe and working for the United States. He as amazing as his work was, I don't think he was anywhere near the peak of his powers. So it's a very sad. But just I lost a collaborator, I lost a friend, and comics lost a tremendous contributor to the medium, whose influence is still felt today. You see a lot of artists who have little Jorge touches to their work, and he's still greatly admired throughout the industry for his work. So there you have it. There's the book on my friend Jorgito. Phil Hatfield, what is your all-time favorite TV Western? Well, hands down, The Rifleman. It's actually my favorite television show of all time. Lucas McCain and his young son, what's his face, Mark. I haven't watched an episode in a while. But yeah, this is my favorite. I loved it as a kid. It was my dad's favorite Western. This is back when they had half-hour drama shows, and they were just packed with story from beginning to end. And every episode of The Rifleman is essentially the same. Somebody shows up in Norfolk, the town near Lucas McCain's ranch, and starts pushing people around and pissing Lucas off. But he's a man of peace. He doesn't want any trouble, even though he carries a lever-action Winchester around with him. He'd rather get along than have to kill everybody. But by the end of the episode, he's got to kill everybody. All the bad guys have got to go. What makes the show special is the interesting ways they would get to that final confrontation and the twists and turns, because they knew we can't just have the same story every week. So they would find different ways to add emotional heart to the story and consequences and stakes and everything else. But you tuned in to see Lucas just gun these guys down and and look cool doing it. So, but yeah, still my favorite show. It's just a show with a lot of heart. I have a lot of affection for it. Okay, Thomas Arbonitis. How do you find a new artist for new projects? Is there some old artists you worked with in the past you hit up much nowadays? Curious if you've done anything with Joe Bennett also. No, I've never worked with Joe Bennett. I'm certainly aware of his art. I'm certainly aware he's a very talented guy. Unless maybe I worked with him back when he was a young Turk just getting into the business, and they handed me a story and I've forgotten about it by now. But I don't believe I ever worked with him. I broke a lot of guys in. I was the first writer for an awful lot of guys in the 80s and 90s who were just getting in. But how do you find artists? Well, you can go to Artist Alley, but most of Artist Alley is people shilling prints and stuff like that. So you're not going to find a lot of exciting new talent there. Mostly I have, well, Neil Adams, yeah. But I'm not saying anything about Neil here. Neil's, turning his work into coin. We've all done it. We've all sat in Artist Alley and sold stuff. So, that's fine. But, you're not going to find, generally you're not going to find anybody that does real continuity work in Artist Alley. So it's kind of a waste to go there. But, interesting to see people. And a lot of times it's old friends, and a lot of times it's me. I'm there hawking my work, generally seated at a table next to Sergio Cariello, and a good time is had by all. But I find a lot of artists over the web. People approach me all the time. They always want to show me samples by email or through private messaging on Facebook, and I've actually found a number of guys to work with in that way. A lot of times a guy will approach me and say, a guy or gal will approach me and say, look, I've got, would you take a look at my portfolio? And they've got websites, and I'll go take a look. And I've always got projects in mind that if I found the right artist, I would do them. I'm just sort of like waiting for the right person. And recently I've started a new project for ArcTunes with Anthony Gonzalez Clark. It's a new project called My Sister Suprema. And it's a project I've had in mind for years. But I saw his artwork and it's like, wow, this guy fits so perfectly. And he was anxious to work with me. So we went to town. And that series should be premiering soon on ArcTunes. My Sister Suprema. It's a superhero parody. And Anthony's work is just, it's a comedy. And he just brings so much to the party. It's so much funnier with his artwork. It's a terrific collaboration. As far as working with guys I worked with before, yeah, I've always got my short list. Often I can't afford to work with them; their page rates are too high. But I'm always anxious, to work with Graham Nolan or Sergio, right now I'm working on a project for Graham Nolan. It's a anthology of action adventure stories, and I just earlier this week scripted a 10-page story about Vikings that Kike Alcatena will be doing. And Kike is a longtime collaborator. We worked on Punisher, Alien Legion, Conan, Batman together. And I was anxious, to work with him again. And when Graham brought this project up, he said he had a bunch of artists in mind. And I said, well, for this story, I'd really like to work with Kike. And of course, Graham was all for it. He's very familiar with Alcatena's work, which is always amazing. So I believe Alcatena at this moment. I wrote the script on a Monday. Today, as I'm recording this, is a Friday, and I think Kike's already at work on it. So yeah, I mean, it's a mix of the old and the new. I'll work with the older pros that I've worked with before because they're friends every chance I get. But I'm always looking for new talent. Always willing to look at someone's portfolio to see if we're a good fit together. In the early 90s, I don't know who wrote this question. Somehow I lost their name, and I apologize. If you email me at brunobookstore.com, I'll make it up to you somehow. But sorry, today you don't get your name mentioned on the internet. Anyway, it's a great question. In the early 90s, all of the Superman titles essentially became one book with one title leading directly into the next. The Bat books, on the other hand, were kept somewhat separate unless a crossover was involved. Was there ever any talk to do to the Bat books what had been done to the Superman books? Yes, there was. Basically, shortly after the Superman books began the policy of having stories lead from one comic to another, Denny O'Neil brought up at a Bat Summit, the 1994 Bat Summit, which this is a picture of. Before we go ahead, let me identify everybody in the picture. Okay, front row, left to right. That's Doug Mensch, Alan Grant, Graham Nolan, Denny O'Neil, and Archie Goodwin there at the end. Back row, left to right, that's Jim Ballant. Then me, then Jordan Gorfinkel, Scott Peterson, and Darren Vincenzo. So now you know everybody. This is the day that we picked the new Batman costume that would be used coming out of Nightfall. Anyway, back to my story. Denny proposed that we take the 3 Batman monthlies and do the same thing the Superman people had done, and we run the stories concurrently through them. And not only that, but unlike the Superman titles, which would be continued to be written by their usual writers, Roger Stern, Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, our monthly arcs would all be written by the same writer. So in other words, 1 month, Doug would write all 3 issues, Batman, Detective, and Shadow of the Bat. The next month, Alan would write all 3 monthlies, and then I would write all 3 monthlies following that. We would just do round robin. We would go back and forth. I don't think Doug or Alan were happy with this idea, but they didn't. Either they didn't say anything, or I was the first one to speak up. And I said, I can't tell you how much I hate this idea, for a variety of reasons. I said, number one, I'm finally getting to work with Graham Nolan, and we're really in a stride here on Detective. We're really hitting a great rhythm here on the stories and everything else. And I don't want to do anything to break that up, you know. And I said, the other reason is that all 3 of these titles have a distinct flavor to them. Doug was writing these, you know, creepier, quasi-supernatural stories. I was dealing with police procedural mysteries, you know, in keeping with the Detective Comics theme. And Alan was writing what Alan writes, these you know, complicated character profiles of, you know, psychotics. He was coming up with these great new villains. And he was, you know, he had his own, we all had our own universes. He was writing Batman in the Allen verse. I was writing Batman in the Dixon verse, and Doug was writing Doug in the Mensch verse. And I think we were all happy the way we were, and we didn't want to go to this new format. The other argument I made is that the art style on all 3 books was so diverse that it would be jarring to the readers. Okay. The artists, we all had great art teams, but their art didn't look similar. I mean, Batman didn't even look the same in each one of these books. There was no consistency. And I thought particularly jarring to jump from Kelly Jones to Graham Nolan, or Graham Nolan back to Kelly Jones. You know, it just, while they are, you know, tremendous Batman talents, legendary Batman comic book artists, their styles don't match. They're nothing like one another. Their approaches aren't anything like one another. And I thought that ultimately it would fail. I thought it would we would see a fall in sales. And Denny's reply, well, Denny was shocked. But his first reply was, well, do you know that by not writing, you know, you're having an opportunity to write Batman. You're having an opportunity to write the lead title. And Batman pays much higher royalties than either Detective Comics or Shadow of the Bat. So your income would go up by writing Batman, 4 times a year. And I said, I don't care about that. That doesn't matter to me. It more matters to me that Graham and I stay what we're doing. And I said, and I know, even though they're not saying anything, I know Doug just wants to keep working with Kelly. He loves working with Kelly. And I know that Alan just wants to keep doing his own thing, And so Denny said, well, but I've already told Jeanette, or Paul, it was Paul Levitz at the time, I've already told Paul that this is what we're doing. This is the main thrust of the Bat Summit, that we're going to plan, this Bat Summit, we're going to plan out this new scheme. And I said, look, if that's what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do, but I'm not happy. And I don't think anybody else is. I don't think any of our other creative team are happy. And so then he gets on the phone and he goes into another room. We had like a suite we were meeting in. He goes into another room. Well, we can hear him. And he says, he calls Paul, and he says, "Look, we got changing plans. We're going to have to change what we're doing." He says, I didn't think this would ever happen, but we have a writer who's refusing higher royalties." He says, "Chuck doesn't want to do it." And so we didn't. I made my arguments, and apparently Denny and Paul were convinced by them. And I think Doug and Alan both heaved a sigh of relief that we wouldn't have to go this route. And, we were good. So that's why, you can blame me. That's why the Bat titles didn't follow what the Superman titles were doing, and doing continuous stories across the 3 monthlies. And the thing is, it fit for Superman because the Superman art was, consistent. The styles of all the people doing Superman, it wasn't jarring to jump from. I mean, I've read some of these continuities recently, and there's no oh my God, everything's changed. Superman doesn't look the same as he did in the previous installment. So it worked for Superman. It was never going to work for Batman. So here we go. This is the question I've been getting over and over and over and over again. I want to be fair because a lot of you have asked this question, and I think I've had everything but people coming to my door to ask this question. I've got it on Facebook, emails, private messaging, and I guess everybody wants an answer. So I'm gonna be fair and put up the first questions I got on this from Facebook. John Trent says, "What's your reaction to DC Comics retconning Tim Drake and making him attracted to dudes?" Jonathan Haley Tang shortly thereafter said, "What are your thoughts on the recent Tim Drake retcon?" Stefan the Wiki, "Very disgusting to term Tim when he never was written as gay." Tom Morris, "Do you have any thoughts on the apparent trend of legendary creators now disowning, being ashamed of the work or works that made them legends? Also, sorry that the new memo from DC must be, yeah, do we have anything else Chuck Dixon worked on that we can bleep all over?" Okay, my bona fides. What are my bona fides on Robin? I wrote 100 of his monthly issues. I wrote numerous miniseries, specials, annuals of Tim Drake Robin. I did not create Tim Drake Robin. Marv Wolfman created Tim Drake Robin. Alan Grant further developed Tim Drake, but then I was tasked by Denny O'Neil to develop the character further and make him worthy of being Batman's sidekick, basically. So he moved from ancillary character to full-fledged boy wonder. And, Robin is an iconic character, been around forever. And, it's, most of what I feel, I'm not surprised by what happened because this is what they do. And it's just kind of, it's disappointing more than anything else, because why couldn't they just create a new character instead of leaning into a question that's existed for the Robin character almost since its creation, thanks to this gentleman, Frederick Wortham, who introduced the idea that there may be some sort of homosexual subtext to Batman and Robin, and now they've basically confirmed it. For what reason, I have no understanding. I mean, it's a cynical marketing ploy because it brings attention to the title. What it will not bring to the title is increased sales. Because these things never work that way. There have been gay characters in American comics since the 80s. It's not a new thing. It's not stunning or brave. It's just changing things for the sake of changing them. I mean, what's next? Hal Jordan is a cannibal. I mean, what are they going to do next? But this has been the flavor of the month for almost 3 decades, is to reveal that a character is bi or gay, which to me is a distinction without a difference. But so I don't understand the point of it. The character was never written this way, never conceived this way, but this is going to be his continuity from now on. Even if they retcon it back, even if they do a reboot and he's no longer bi-curious, he will be bi-curious for the rest of time. This is going to be part of his continuity. And I don't think there's any real good reason for this beyond a simple marketing ploy. And like I said, these marketing ploys aren't even, they don't work. They're not effective. They don't raise sales, but they raise interest from the media and from the peers within the industry, which I guess is the point. To get your back slapped at an editorial meeting, or possibly, get an interview with Vanity Fair. Maybe your name might get mentioned on CNN. That's the end result of this. But I think the vast majority of the American public has no idea who Tim Drake is. So now Robin is gay, because they don't know the difference between. They don't know there's been 3 versions of Robin or 4 or 5 versions of Robin. They just know Robin the Boy Wonder. So they're thinking, Burt Ward and Adam West, and now, Robin is into guys. So, but at the end of the day, it's just lazy writing. It's like when they used to kill characters to get interest in them, and that was the only idea they had for a long time. Now they delve into the character's sexual proclivities, and for my money. And when I was writing comics, and I was writing under the comic code, none of my characters were ever sexually active. Now, I wrote plenty of scenes where, there was a clinch and a fade out, and you could assume that the characters went on to, do the deed. But I left that up to the reader. You could believe that, or you could not. It was like the old movies where the leading man and the leading lady, have a passionate kiss, fades to black, and when we see them again, they're having breakfast together, wearing different clothes. So you could think, you could fill in the blank between those 2 scenes any way you wished, and that's where I always left it. The only characters I ever had who were sexually active that I wrote were Conan the Barbarian, and occasionally Frank Castle would get lucky. But other than that, I didn't. I dealt in romantic relationships rather than sexual ones. But by introducing the idea that a character is gay or bisexual, you are introducing the sexual aspects of it. I mean, you're saying the word. And I just don't think it has a place. I know kids don't really read these things anymore, and they're written for adults, but it just seems like a weird way to go in a medium filled with characters who run around in masks and capes and boots. It just seems to approach the fetishistic to explore their sexuality in any way, even just to hint at it. Which I imagine that's what this comic is doing. It's simply hinting at what might happen in between the panels or in between issues. So I don't see any point to it. So like I said, no, I'm not disgusted. I'm not angry. I mean, I don't know these characters. They can do what they want with them. But it is just, it's boring at the end of the day. It's just boring and a little disappointing. So, hey, I got a new novel out. It's Levon's Hunt. It is the 9th novel in the Levon Cade series. And this is the novel series that scratches my Punisher itch. Levon Cade is a badass former Marine, Alabama boy, who in this novel gets himself in trouble with a ring of child sex traffickers that goes all the way up to a United States congressman. So Levon is getting himself deep into trouble in this novel, as he has always done in every novel previous. So if you want to check it out, it's at Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And there will be another Levon novel before the end of the year called Levon's Prey. That's a follow-up to this one. So I'd appreciate it if you took a look. Hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I gird myself for the comments on YouTube following this episode. But I appreciate your attention. And I will see all of you down the road.